Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Simon Talks Music, where I, Simon, talk about music. And I told you all that I had some individual album reviews on the way, so here we have one that I feel has been long overdue. My review of the newest album from A$AP Rocky, Don't Be Dumb. So I'll be honest, up until this year, I didn't actually know that much about A$AP Rocky. Yeah, I'd listened to his classic debut mixtape Live Love A$AP a while ago, a mixtape I revisited in preparation for this review, and it still absolutely slaps. But I never listened to any of his official studio albums, and I didn't really know what made him such a prominent name in the rap scene. And I still am not going to pretend to know more than I do, but from what I've heard, it seems like he highly popularized the idea of a rapper making music that didn't sound like you'd expect for his city. Despite being from New York, his music did not sound like New York rap. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it led to some pretty mediocre studio albums, with his 2013 debut Long Live A$AP probably being my favorite of his. And while his 2018 album Testing was a little bit better than his really disappointing 2015 album At Long Last A$AP, it has been nearly 8 years since Testing dropped, and there's a lot that happened within that time. He entered a relationship with the famous singer Rihanna. They now have 3 kids. He had a bunch of legal issues, including some charges that he was eventually acquitted from. But I'm not going to pretend to know everything about everything that went on there. But I will say I do think that most people seem to agree that regarding his music, it's not really that much about the lyrics for the most part. Although on this album, I think there's a bit more to them than on previous A$AP Rocky albums. So I do want to try and discuss this as thoroughly as I can. And I'm reading this script and realizing I did not actually discuss it that thoroughly. But I wanted to get this review out. I don't think the lyrics are super deep for the most part, as far as I can tell, even though he does have some stuff to say. And I do think it's probably one of those albums that makes the most sense for me to review track by track, from start to finish. I might not have a ton to say about every song, but I am going to give at least some brief thoughts on most of them, if not all of them. And it just feels like the best way for me to do this review. So if you want my opinions on the individual songs from start to finish, we're going to start with the opening track. This album opens with Order of Protection, which seems like a typical comeback song as an album opener, and honestly, it's okay. It's not anything super special in my opinion, but I do like the production on this track, and there's some nice synths in the background. It just doesn't really do much to stand out, and I do find the hook a little bit obnoxious. Then the following track is Helicopter, which I think is a pretty catchy tune with a decent hook interpolated from P.D. Pablo's Raise Up. And I think the instrumental is pretty solid too, and I like A$AP Rocky's flow on this one. Although that "who get more pussy than a lesbian" line was kinda weird, and I don't think this track is really anything particularly special in the grander scheme of things. And then from there, we get a quick interlude which features Rocky talking about doing what he wants to do rather than what people expect, ending with the line, "I ain't gonna put out no crystal clear garbage, I'll put out staticky good shit." And then we get the more grimy, buzzing synths of Stole Ya Flow, which seems to be a diss at Drake, and I think a pretty good one, even though I don't know everything about the history between the two of them. Although it definitely seems like Drake has had a very hard time moving on from Rihanna, as far as I can tell. And this is a pretty clever diss with that hook of, "First you stole my flow, then I stole your bitch." It does leave me wondering, though, why this is called Stole Ya Flow, if he's claiming to be the one whose flow was stolen. But whatever, it is still a pretty good song. Although, what the fuck does he mean when he says, "My bitch badder than my toddler"? But anyway, following that song is Stay Here for Life, a collab with Brent Faiyaz, who's an artist I have not really listened to that much, although from what I have heard of his music, I have not really been a big fan of it, based on what I remember, which isn't much to be honest. And then I actually found out that this is a reworking of a 2025 Brent Faiyaz song, although I still like his melodies, and the sample is used quite well, even though the songs surrounding it could be a lot better. That sounds like a strange thing for me to say, but it's hard to explain. I think it's a well-used sample in this context, and there's enough elements here that make it fit, but A$AP Rocky himself doesn't really bring much to the table here in my opinion, and the "fuck you to sleep" line was kinda gross. And at points, the instrumental can be a bit distracting, like with that weird synth near the start that keeps hitting over and over again and just feels overpowering. Then at the end of the song, he makes it clear to everyone that he isn't a player, and that leads into the next song, Playa, which not only sounds like a pretty basic trap song without much real energy or hookiness, but it's also just kind of confusing considering the song before it saying he's not a player. But then he starts rapping about ain't wifing no thoughts and just sleeping around. Although it seems like he's talking to someone about this, not talking about himself. But then he starts talking about monogamy later, and I'm just confused what this song is actually about. But whatever, it is a fine song, just not a particularly memorable one. No Trespassing is a bit better in my opinion, but still doesn't have much to it that really stands out to me. Although I do like the gun sounds with the screaming in the background. And then the following Stop Snitching is even better, with its really good use of a Leroy Hutson sample and a cool beat based on that, and great flows from Rocky as well as Sauce Walka, the latter of whom has a really interesting line where he mentions people lie to their mama and daddy, but go tell the truth to an officer. But then we get some more of the more out there moments on this album, starting with STFU, or Shut the Fuck Up, which has more grimy production and a lot of real pissed off energy, which I think he pulls off quite well. And then there's the lead single to this album, Punk Rocky, which, yeah, it's really not very good. It's a weird sort of psychedelic rock song, but it's not very rockin' at all, and the melodies just sound weirdly reminiscent of Weezer's Undone the Sweater song. And I just don't think it works, especially with how dramatic it's trying to be, showing him moving on from a failed relationship that he thought would succeed, or I guess failing to move on. And it's kind of odd considering how many references there are in this album to Rihanna, but whatever, that's not really the point here. The point is, this song is bad. Air Force Black DeMarco has a nice instrumental with a cool beat and some glitchy sounds that I think fit quite well, and I like Rocky's flow on this track. And I don't think the mellower moments on this song are bad either, although there are some very cringy bars here, like, had an anorexic model bitch, she was an eater, as well as, I be with your bitch late night, James Corden. And then Whiskey Release Me takes a bit to get going sonically, but I do like some of the commentary, which seems to be about growing up and making tough decisions, even though it is in a lot of ways a typical braggadocious song. But I think it kind of fits, considering his real life is quite different from most people's. But there are also some more cringe bars on this one. Make her holler, yes, 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 no Tourette's. But then we get the album's best song with Robbery, a collab with Doechii based on an old sample of a cover of a Duke Ellington piece. And both Rocky and Doechii have absolutely great performances here, especially Doechii, and it's a reminder to me I gotta check out more of her music, which I've been meaning to do for a while. And it's hard to tell exactly what the scene they're painting here is. It's some kind of a robbery, but it also might be metaphorical and eventually gets quite sexual, although I also really like the interlude with A$AP Rocky reminding us all that this is a robbery, and it's very much a silly song in a lot of ways too, and an absolutely great one. Then we get the penultimate track, Don't Be Dumb / Trip Baby, which starts out with a really emotional, sort of dreamy psychedelic first half, but I'm not as big a fan of the rap verse at the end, although it's still not bad. And I like it better than the closing track, which isn't the worst song here, but is kind of a weak note to end on, even though I can appreciate the commentary of the lyrics from will.i.am and Rocky, who talk about the current state of the world and how scary everything has become, with Rocky talking about issues like racism, school shootings, and even low-quality cafeteria food for kids. And he also mentions that if he's gonna sacrifice his life for anyone, it better be one of his kids. And it's got a very dystopian feeling to it, but not just to be all doom and gloom, but rather with a slight glimmer of hope that we all need to help keep alive. Yeah, I know I'm praising it a lot, but I do find the sampled hook kind of annoying, and Jessica Pratt doesn't really add much to this at all. It's only 3.5 minutes, but it still feels quite a bit longer than it needs to be. It's not a bad song by any means, but I wish I liked it a lot better, especially because I like a lot of what it's doing, it just doesn't feel fully fleshed out as a song. But whatever, the album was okay. I'm not sure I'd call it his worst album, but it's also not his best in my opinion, and there's enough weird musical failures and bad lines to keep this from being more than just mediocre to me. So I guess I'll give it a strong 5, maybe a light 6, for having a lot of energy at points and being quite versatile, and a lot of it feels very honest and real about his life in recent years, while also having a sense of humor at points. So yeah, there's a lot that I can praise here, but it's got too many flaws for me to really be won over by this as a whole. Robbery is an excellent track, that's for sure, beyond that, I don't think this will have much replay value for me. But as always, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of this album and or what you thought of my review. I will admit, maybe I misunderstood some things about the lyrics. I am very bad at, or at least I feel like I'm bad at analyzing lyrics a lot of the time. But I don't know, maybe I'm not as bad at it as I think I do. I genuinely don't know. But again, it's all just my personal opinion on this album. Just telling you what I think, how I heard the album. And again, it just didn't really click for me, but I do think there's some interesting stuff on here. It might be worth a listen if, I mean, there's a good chance you've already heard it. I mean, it's the new A$AP Rocky album that so many people have been waiting for 8 years now. But anyway, feel free to let me know in the comment section what you think of the album and or of my review, or if you have any other ideas of album reviews that you'd like to see or other video ideas you'd like to see. Ideally, albums that came out in 2026, but I'm open to other ideas as well. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, I will be back with more soon. Stay tuned to find out what I'm doing. I have a few different projects planned for this YouTube channel that are a little bit different than what I usually do. I mean, fingers crossed I actually managed to make the time to do them, but I've been working on some of them a little bit over the past few months, I guess you could say. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Thank you for watching. I will see you all later.